Welcome to the On-Premise IT Podcast, the only show that dares to be both on topic or on premise, and sometimes on premises or on location. Each time we meet, we bring together a group of IT experts to discuss a single idea. On today's episode, we're talking about repatriation from the cloud, which sounds a little bit strange coming from a group of people who are going to Cloud Field Day. But before we get into that topic, let's quickly meet who's on the panel today.
Hi, my name is Jon Myer, Chief Marketing and Content Creator at Myer Media. You can find me at johnmyer.com.
Hi, my name is Michael Levan. I'm a consultant and a content creator, and I primarily focus in the Kubernetes and containerization space.
And I'm Stephen Foskett, organizer of Tech Field Day and publisher of Gestalt IT. You can find me at sfoskett on most social medias, and you can find me here on the On-Premise podcast, along with utilizing CXL and the weekly IT news rundown at Gestalt IT. So we have been talking about this whole thing about hybrid cloud for a long time. And before you reach for the bucket, when I say hybrid cloud, please stick with me. Yeah, the term has gotten watered down, and yeah, it's been used in some unsavory ways by some vendors. But the truth is that cloud is kind of not cloud. We went from sort of our irrational exuberance, everything needs to be in the cloud phase, to a much more measured approach now. And Michael, let's start with you. What are you seeing in terms of enterprises looking at the cloud with a little bit more wisdom and a little bit more skepticism, and maybe moving some workloads back on site?
Yeah, so I would say for the past maybe 2-3 months or so, I've just been seeing a lot of talk just on social media in general about the whole cloud thing not giving us the cost savings that we thought, the resource savings that we thought, and ultimately organizations thinking like, hey, should I move back on-prem? But as we all know, migrations take a long time. It took organizations forever to go from on-prem to the cloud. So I imagine at this point, we're going to see a lot more hybrid, which is, both. We're going to see a little bit on-prem. We're going to see a little bit in the cloud.
So here's a question. Are we seeing a lot of folks come back from the cloud completely, or are we seeing a lot of folks actually going in a hybrid type approach where they're really starting to integrate not only those data centers into cloud or vice versa?
It's a good question. I would say for the new organizations, like the startups and stuff, for example, they're all kind of starting in the cloud, right? Just because it's easier. Nobody wants to go spend $1 million at a data center when you can do a pay-as-you-go model in the cloud. But for the organizations that were on-prem, then in the cloud, they've been kind of thinking for, however long, X amount of time that, okay, wow, this isn't giving us the cost benefits, the resource benefits that we originally thought. So now they're kind of shifting back in a sense. And this isn't going to be a shift that's going to happen like that. It's kind of just starting to happen. I think I personally saw a lot of it being talked about after Basecamp. They put out that big blog post where they essentially said we're moving off of AWS.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that with Field Day as well. We're seeing a lot more companies coming in with solutions that allow smarter workload placement, whether it is something that basically allows you to build your own cloud, something that allows you to extend the cloud into the data center, a overarching platform for what has been called multi-cloud or hybrid cloud that allows you to kind of get the best of both worlds. And I think that all of this points to this direction, that companies are just getting a lot smarter about on-premises IT as well as cloud IT.
Stephen, I think you mentioned it and indicated really in the beginning in the intro is that everybody saw cloud as the de facto, the go-to. We got to get to cloud. Let's go. You get to cloud, and then all of a sudden they realize their bill, their usage, their skill set, the education, the culture, all that stuff's not in place. And now they're spending a lot more, and they don't realize that it's a real-time, on-demand variable cost rather than fixed. So they're like, oh, we got to go back to what we once did. We're moving back from the cloud, which is not the factor. In fact, I think a lot are starting to realize that we need to slow down, put in the methodology, put in a thing, and let's integrate our existing on-premise or premises into the cloud and actually talk between those and do a slow, methodical migration and understand our daily, like a crawl, walk, run type methodology.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably where like you're seeing Azure Stack HCI, you're seeing Google Anthos, you're seeing EKS Anywhere. Like these platforms or tools, whatever you want to call them, have been around for a little bit, but I think now we're just kind of starting to see them getting talked about a little bit more, and even just the overall. Server management pieces like Azure Arc, for example, like they have a Kubernetes management plane, I guess you can call it, but you can also manage servers and stuff that are on-prem. And so like we're definitely seeing a little bit more of that talked about as well.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the specifics here and some of the specific tools. I'm really glad that you mentioned, outposts and so on, because I think that those are sort of a low-hanging fruit way of repatriating data from the cloud. But of course, as you mentioned as well, there's a lot more than that. So what are the ways in which companies are building a for real this time, hybrid cloud?
Yeah, so I would say definitely something like Azure Stack HCI, Google Anthos, EKS Anywhere, AWS Outposts, like you said, depending on what cloud they're kind of running in right now. And then I guess the other reality too is like OpenStack, for example, right? Like I kind of saw somebody talking about OpenStack on Twitter the other day, and they were like, "Oh, whoa!" People were commenting like, "Oh, is this still a thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's been a thing. It didn't go anywhere. It just like wasn't the hot thing that people were talking about, but like it's still there." So even something like OpenStack, where it gives you the ability to like have that cloud feel, so your engineers, so your developers feel like they're building cloud native, but at the same time you're managing it, and you can send data and retrieve data from public cloud as well. So you can definitely have a true hybrid model in that fashion versus just racking and stacking, putting in Azure Stack HCI box in a data center somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's fun to kind of rip on OpenStack and say, oh, that's old school. It's just like Docker. I mean, I think it's fun to say like, oh, Docker, come on, man. But you know what? It's everywhere. The other thing I was hearing a ton about, especially at KubeCon this year, is OpenShift. There's a massive amount of OpenShift deployment going on out there. You seen that too?
Yeah, because you can actually do it on-prem and in the cloud. So like you can run it on AWS or Azure if you want. You can run it like on bare metal if you want to. They have a bunch of different installation options for like regular just bare metal, or if you want to install it on an ESXi box and VMware, whatever the case may be. So yeah, that's definitely an option as well. I would say that that's more of like a PaaS or a platform as a service option versus a hybrid option. But yeah, of course, yeah, I'm definitely seeing that as well.
So you're not seeing on-prem OpenShift, sorry.
Not a whole lot personally. I am seeing a lot of it, but it's more in the cloud versus on-prem. Yeah, but maybe that'll change. But I haven't seen any data about that actually changing yet.
Good. And then kind of moving more into the Kubernetes world, Rancher, another one that I think a lot of people have sort of, that was last. No way, no man. Rancher's. I'm using Rancher. There's a lot of alternative. I mean, what are the Kubernetes distributions that are taking hold? Is there any Tanzu? What do you think?
I don't personally see Tanzu used. I know I have a few colleagues at VMware that work on it, and it's. I personally like it. I think it's a really cool platform. I just don't see it used all that much. But I see Rancher, I see Portainer, I see Lens. I'm K9S. I think I think that's not the right one. I forget. There's a fourth one that I typically see. I forget off the top of my head. But those are more like orchestration managers. Whereas a Kubernetes distro would be something like Azure Kubernetes Service, Elastic Kubernetes Service, Google Kubernetes Engine, OpenShift, kind of. I would say that that's like a Kubernetes distribution as well. So yeah, you have the orchestrator managers, and then you have the distributions themselves.
Okay, and so take us up the stack then. Managers, what are you seeing in real time?
Yeah, so managers in terms of like the orchestration managers for like multiple clusters, for example. Yeah, so I would say the two biggest that I see are Rancher and Portainer. I would say from a cloud perspective, the biggest is, I would say Azure Arc right now. I think, and this is just my opinion, I think Anthos has way more options, Like there's a service mesh that you can use. There's a bunch of different nifty Kubernetes related features that are in Anthos. I just don't see it used as much as Arc, but I would say those would probably be the top 4 that I see right now. And then from a like, let's say, for example, you want to manage your home lab, or maybe, you know, there's one DevOps engineer on your team that just wants one place to manage, you know, all of their Kubernetes clusters, but nobody else is really doing it. You'll probably see something like Lens used.
Well, and Rancher, of course. I mean, the nice thing about Rancher is that K3S is so lightweight, and it works so well with it. And surprise. It's really, really great for a small environment.
Absolutely, yeah. So like from a business enterprise perspective, I see Portainer and Rancher primarily used as like the orchestration managers, yeah.
All right, so what I'm hearing is that there are a ton of tools. There's a lot of ways that you can do this. And those of us, like the 3 of us, are deploying this stuff. We've got labs. You know, we're able to do this. You know, stretch from the cloud to the lab, and of course, there's a whole world of other supporting applications as well. Things like, you know, storage enablement from something like like a Portworx, for example, to optimization software. We're going to be hearing about companies like SoloIO. Morpheus is another field day favorite company that we hear a lot about. Are there others in that sort of realm that you're interested in?
I like Morpheus, and a huge shout out to them because of their, and Brad's going to yell at me for using this single pane of glass kind of comment, because the software really gives you that visibility into all the tools that you're utilizing throughout all of your environments, AWS, Azure, VMware, other tools, and you really don't have to go all over the place. You're talking about like even management, not only within the OpenStack, but management between all of your hybrid environment, all of your clouds. You know, we probably already talked about multi-cloud in one of these episodes, but now we're talking about even just a cloud and your data center and managing that throughout, complete visibility without having to go through things. So there are a number of like third-party tools that are very efficient in managing all the environments, or at least giving you the 99% of what you need to get the work done.
Yeah, they're well, if you look at the CNCF landscape, there are over 1,000 tools. And there is a category in there for like managers, like orchestration managers. So there are a lot. Yeah. And at the end of the day, just like any other technology or platform that's in the same category, they're all kind of doing the same thing 80% of the way there, just with their own spin on it. So I would say it's really more about like which one has that specific feature that you're like, that's it. That's what we need for our environment. Because that's always the differentiator between these tools, is like they're all kind of doing the same thing, but they got one little thing that you're like, that's it. That's what I need.
Absolutely. And I think that people get excited, when they see things. Stormforge is another field day company that people really have loved hearing about. We're also going to see networking stuff here. So we've got Forward Networks talking about digital twin, and Avasa, which is another really, really interesting entrant here as well. Are you guys familiar with the networking side of things?
I'm very familiar with the networking side, and I'm interested in the digital twin aspect and seeing how that's going to work, because I know how it works in the AI/ML space, and really simulating what are the potential without having a huge cost or business impact on the solution. So I really want to see how this is going to affect or be a solution for customers and how they're going to utilize it. I understand maybe, if you think about it in not only a hybrid type environment where you make a single change or a single flip of a switch or a port, what is the impact and downstream that's going to have without having like an A/B testing that really actually drives the business without having an impact downstream?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Because the thing that I've learned here is that one of the reasons we need solutions like Avasa, for example, is because networking is really, really hard, and it gets really, really hard really, really quickly when you have complicated multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, mobile application deployments, and so the idea that you could at least, test, prototype and test networking changes is really, really important. And we've been hearing so much about this. The networking side of things. I mean, we've got networking field day happening the week before Cloud Field Day, and even at other field day events, Tech Field Day, we're going to be hearing more about other networking companies. I don't want to make this all about field day, but it's like, field day ends up being sort of a canary in the coal mine in terms of what are companies working on and what are the new exciting areas of development, because they come and they present this stuff. So yeah, the digital twin aspect I think is going to be a really interesting one to hear about, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think of it, because it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny from a networking perspective. I mean, like, I started out my career in systems administration and network administration. So like from the technical perspective of like what packets are, what subnets are, how to do all that, like I still know that piece, especially in Kubernetes. Like Kubernetes and overall containerization, I'd argue that like 70% of it is networking. So if you're not good with networking, that's like the first place you have to start. But and this is something that I should change, because I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the space right now. I haven't followed a lot of like the new and exciting tools that are happening from a networking perspective. Honestly, I'm always looking at Cisco and I'm always looking at Fortinet, because those were the two vendors that I just always used throughout my career. But I got to check out some of the other stuff as well going on.
Michael, this is really ironic that we're talking about networking, and you just had a post today talking about Wireshark and the communication around it. Question for you, and Stephen, I don't mean to switch things up, but a question for you. Starting out, my career was in sysadmin, and I found the value of understanding the network, the core principle about understanding how servers and everything work. Without it, I don't think I could really fully understand how cloud and the communication works. Do you feel the same way, that at least people should have the basis of networking to understand or work within any type of network or cloud environment?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, regardless of like what path you take, if you want to take the cloud native path, the on-prem path, the sysadmin path, the storage path, like whatever security path, there's not much you can do without networking. Like if you don't understand the way routes work, if you don't understand the way ports work, if you don't understand the way subnets work, if you don't understand the way IPs work, that's just how data gets sent back and forth, right? Like packets are packets regardless of whatever your specialty is. And regardless of if you're in the cloud or on-prem or on Kubernetes, it's all the same thing. And this is something that I push out a lot on social media. A lot of my posts are around understanding what you need to know before you dive into Kubernetes. I post a lot of stuff about networking, a lot of stuff about service mesh, which is encrypting routes back and forth and stuff like that. If I didn't have the opportunity to be a sysadmin, to be a network admin, if I didn't have the infrastructure experience, if I didn't have the networking experience, I definitely wouldn't be able to work with Kubernetes. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't want to, I don't want to make this sound too much like a love fest, but yeah, I actually read that blog post this morning and I really, really enjoyed it. I have to say, when I was coming up as a systems administrator, the best education I ever got was Sniffer University, and learning really how Ethernet works. Like really, really how Ethernet works. And don't tell Tom Hollingsworth this, but honestly, networking is one of those things that you really have to understand in order to make cloud work, in order to make even storage work. And another aspect that comes up too, so you're mentioning Wireshark, is security. And as you mentioned, so at Cloud Field Day, we're going to hear from Fortinet. They have, Forta everything, but they have specifically their FortiGate firewall. They have a version that runs in the cloud natively and is specifically optimized to protect cloud applications. And that's what they're going to be presenting at Cloud Field Day. And that's, I think, an interesting angle as well, because I think there again, you've got a company with a long history in the enterprise that's coming in and saying, like, we've learned something about the cloud and we've tried to bring, this enterprise knowledge base to cloud compute. Security is a huge thing. I mean, you said networking is 70% of Kubernetes. Hardly agree. I think storage is a good 70% of Kubernetes, and security is another 70% of Kubernetes as well, in terms of what you need to learn.
So Fortinet, I want to see what they're going to present, because back in 2015, I was like one of the original testers of FortiGate, the WAFs, everything implemented in AWS. And it had its quirks, but it worked out pretty well. I want to see the improvements that they did and how efficient it is, how lightweight it is, the integration, Fortinet Manager. I want to see all those types of stuff for cloud, because I think this is really key when you're utilizing these services that are not traditionally meant or weren't traditionally meant for cloud, but now have been refactored for cloud in an efficient manner for the scalability.
Yeah, I always loved Fortinet. I'll always remember just like being on the terminal, working in iOS for years, Cisco's operating system, not iPhone, and then just and then like seeing the UI in Fortinet, I was like, oh wow, this is game changing stuff here. Like it was like the click, right, where you weren't on the terminal anymore, and you were just like on this UI, and you're like, oh wow.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's really the most interesting thing, is that you have to look at solutions not as, is this newfangled or old-fashioned. You have to look at it as, does this freaking work? Does this work in this environment? Is it designed to work in this environment? And I think that that's one of the things that we're really seeing a lot of. There's going to be another secret presentation at Cloud Field Day that's going to be under embargo that will release the videos later. But a little spoiler is that it's the same kind of thing, where you've got a lot of enterprise experience, but then you've also got a cloud native approach, a cloud native solution to what is really an enterprise problem. And I think that that's the case with all of these things, in that, enterprises are needing to figure out how to work in this new environment, and they need to get real about the fact that it's not just somebody else's data center. I know it's fun to say the cloud is just somebody else's computer, but it's totally not. I mean, yeah, okay, it literally is, but it is not just another computer, and it is fundamentally different. In fact, and the cloud is kind of bringing that fundamental difference back into the data center, and I'm really glad to see that, because frankly, we all needed a kick in the pants. A lot of the old school data center concepts, especially networking and storage, were really showing they were getting pretty long in the tooth. And there was a lot of tradition and a lot of things that we did because that's how we've always done it. And cloud, I think it was fun because, frankly, a lot of the cloud stuff was designed with very little understanding of networking or storage, especially, or security, because they totally just didn't understand those fields. But by having that new perspective, and it gave a breath of fresh air, and now we had to rethink that. And so, as you say, on the networking side, on the security side, on the storage side, we had to say, wait a second, we don't have to do these things the way we always did them. We can do these things completely differently. And that's I think one of the biggest values of cloud in the enterprise data center. What do you guys think? As people who've seen this happen, what are you looking forward to in the future of this hybrid cloud that includes the data center in the cloud? What is what are you excited about?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing that I'm excited about, honestly, is, I mean, obviously the tools and all the cool, nifty features and things that are going to come out, but I'm really excited to see this shift back to really thinking about things from an engineering perspective, because I feel like with the cloud, it gave us a level of abstraction where it was like people thought that they didn't have to think anymore. And a lot of the new engineers that came in the past 2-3 years, that's what they're used to. So now, like, whereas for us, like, we went from on-prem to cloud, now we're going back on-prem, all the new engineers are going to have to go from cloud to on-prem, and it's going to be drastically different. But I am excited to kind of see like how that's going to form, and what tools, maybe what certifications, like what training is actually going to come out for stuff like that. Because there may be, like, for example, the MCSAs went away, but maybe this is something where a server type of certification like that is going to come back again. And, so I'm excited to see like how the transition is going to look for engineers.
I think where everybody from like the engineers who were on premise and going to the cloud had to have a change or shift in mindset and understand what the cloud was about, how to implement and architect things. And then those who started out in the cloud now actually have to learn and educate and change the mindset of going on premise or in a hybrid type approach. It's almost like where everybody had to relearn or learn cloud in general, now they have to learn a data center. And I think that'll be unique, where we actually have to educate people on what a data center is and how things are connected. And you actually might have to rack a server. I don't think you're ever getting away from racking a server or putting a server in. There's going to be those, who's been around for a while, the enterprises who need a physical data center. That's why they developed AWS Outpost, because they know you're going to have stuff still in your data center or localized.
And at the risk of getting a little bit too off topic here at the end, I'll also point out that Edge is another really critical area that is happening. And all of these technologies, all of these techniques, everything we've talked about is applicable there too. And just like the physical environment of a data center versus the physical environment or the conceptual environment of the cloud is different, the physical and conceptual and infrastructure platform details at the edge have their own unique spin, but all of them are bringing this same technology to bear. And that's going to be a really interesting aspect of IT moving forward as well. So I really think that this is all really, really important stuff. This is what we're going to be talking about at Cloud Field Day. So we're going to be at Cloud Field Day tomorrow, January 25th, for presentations from some of these companies you've just heard about. We're going to hear from Forward Networks. We're going to hear from Fortinet, the secret company that you'll learn about later. And the event is nice and compact. We're going to be live streaming on LinkedIn as well as on the Tech Field Day website. This is what do you guys think about Field Day? What are you looking forward to from Field Day specifically before we go?
All right, so from Field Day, the in-person and seeing all the other delegates that we talked to remotely, the collaboration, and I hate to use the pun, networking on premises.
Yeah, I would say to echo John, I'm definitely looking forward to getting back on site for conferences and to being able to talk to people and stuff. I would say that's definitely the biggest piece. I think that there's a huge difference between doing something like this virtually and being in front of somebody. You can see people's body language. You can see, you can almost kind of feel how they're feeling, right? So that's definitely a really cool thing. And then, of course, just understanding the latest and greatest and the emerging technologies. I luckily, being independent, I have the opportunity to work with the latest and greatest whenever I feel like it. So I like to definitely hear about all the new stuff that's coming out, all the emerging technologies.
Well, that's great. Before we go, John, where can we connect with you and continue the conversation? Or is there something you're particularly proud of that you want to mention?
Yeah, so I want to tell everybody from Myer Media, we create a lot of the content for Voice of the Customer, customer case studies, compelling podcasts, and you can reach out to us, and I hate to use it, Stephen, at Jon Myer for LinkedIn, or you can do it on Twitter at _Jon Myer. You can also go to johnmyer.com/Myer Media for all your information. I look forward to connecting everybody. Don't forget to follow as well.
Yeah, so for me, you can find me at Michael Levan on LinkedIn, the NJ DevOps guy on Twitter. I post way more on LinkedIn nowadays than I do on Twitter, a lot of long form stuff, so you can just go on my page and get educated pretty quickly. I do anything and everything in the content creation space for Kubernetes and containerization. I focus on a lot of middle of funnel stuff, so engineering focused, practitioner led. So if you go to my blog, dev2 / the NJ DevOps guy. If you listen to the Kubernetes Unpacked podcast on the Packet Pushers Network, you're going to get a lot of that middle of funnel practitioner-led content.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm actually looking forward to Cloud Field Day to seeing the two of you get together because that sounds perilous. As for me, you can find me here every week with the On-Premise IT podcast, also the Utilizing CXL podcast on Mondays, and the Gestalt IT News Rundown on Wednesdays. If you enjoyed this discussion, please do give us a rating, give us a subscription. It really, really does help. You can find us in all of your favorite podcast applications. And of course, you can also find us on YouTube /Gestalt IT Video. This podcast is brought to you by GestaltIT.com, your home for IT coverage from across the enterprise, and also producers of Field Day events, including Cloud Field Day. For this show notes and more episodes, just go to GestaltIT.com /podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.